So, Sarah Vitale, Vice President, Global Account Director at George P. Johnson. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Help our group. This is more of a security conference. Easy Day is about toughest day in the event industry. You come at it from the marketing, the production side of the event world. How did you get involved in this aspect of doing events, and what caused you to be here today?
Honestly, I didn't even know this was really a career or a job. I graduated college and I got into fashion PR, and I loved the branding side of fashion PR, but I, just felt like I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I went into brand licensing, and it was all about, pairing brands with celebrities and doing endorsement deals. And I really liked that, but I kind of wanted to learn more about actually working for brands. And so then I got into advertising, and I really enjoyed that. I got to really know and learn about how to build a brand and how to market it. And I just felt like, I don't know, there was a piece of me that kind of missed the action of being in the fashion world and fashion shows and things like that. So a friend of a friend knew somebody, and they said, hey, they're looking for an account director to come in and run events for Google. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Like, I really would like to see what that's about. And it's kind of how I ended up where I am today. And I never thought that it was an industry to get into. And it's been interesting because I've been able to really pair my experience of branding and marketing with experiential. And I think a lot of people, when you tell them you're in the event industry, they think like, oh, you plan parties.
Right.
But it's really about how do you build these moments that drive ROI and revenue back to these businesses and help them grow. And I think that's super cool. And so that's kind of how I got into it.
Is that how you define it, experiential? Because when I, started doing work with George P. Johnson and others, and this term experiential marketing, I was like, what does that mean?
Yeah. I feel like it's funny because I feel like sometimes people use it as a catch-all, but I have always thought about experiential as about creating human touch points. And for me, when we look at building a conference, it's all about that attendee journey. It's about what experiences are they going to have with that brand and something that's going to make an impact on them. And so I think about it from the human interaction standpoint.
So you talk about those human touch points. Mm-hmm. How long ago did you start on the Google account?
10 years ago.
The security and crowd management and, emergency ops and all that type of planning probably was pretty minimal back then.
Yeah.
And you're focused on those touch points.
Mm-hmm.
What has, security and crowd management done to your role and your team when you're talking about keeping that touch point alive, but guys like us walk in and say, no, you can't do that?
I think no one really thinks about this, but you want, and especially when you go and you attend something, until you're actually somebody who's planning that experience or that event, you never really know the details that go in behind everything. And I think security and safety has been a huge part of the seamless attendee journey. You don't have to think about it. You're not standing in a crowd registering for your badge. You're not standing in a line for food. You're not getting bumped in the back heading into keynotes. And I think safety and security is just one of those things that it's so important to the event experience, but something that's kind of like under the radar in the white knight that kind of makes it all happen.
If it wasn't happening, and we both work on the Google event.
Yeah.
Do you think the attendee would respond negatively if we didn't have everything in place and say, why aren't you doing this?
1,000%. I actually remember one of our events, I think it was last year or the year before, where nothing that you or I could have controlled, but where the Wi-Fi went down and nobody could register to get their event badge. And all of a sudden we had 10,000 people at once coming into this building. And there was just a bottleneck, and we started diverting them to other buildings and other places where they could get their badges. And we started moving them and around the building and wrapping them around corners in the city of San Francisco. And people don't really realize how much goes into planning that. And sure, was it a little bit of a blip in their radar for the day? Maybe 5 minutes. But it was a really important thing that your team was doing behind the scenes, and it made a little impact on their event day. But obviously it had a big impact with us behind the scenes working to make sure that that didn't have a huge impact on them.
I kind of forgot about that day.
You blacked it out.
Yeah.
It's fine.
But it's a great point. It's all of the planning that goes into all aspects of the event team. Right. And something like that happens because, thankfully it was only like an hour and a half before the keynote. So everybody's trying to get there.
Right.
It's a real challenge. Where do you see the challenges? You have a number of clients at GPJ and they're different. Some of them put a lot more effort and resource and budget around those plans, the security and the crowd management plans, and some not as much. From your perspective, are you having to push some of those others to, look at budget differently to address that, or are they really driving that conversation?
I think it's about educating clients and giving them choices, right? And then explaining to them what is the impact going to be to their event. Because I always find if you approach it from the standpoint of here's our recommendation and this is the only thing we're going to do, everyone has a very adverse reaction to that, right? And so it's really educating them on here's what we're recommending and why we're recommending it, and here are the different levels of engagement. But our recommendation is, X because Y and Z have larger implications, and you have to be able to take on that responsibility if you don't choose our recommendation. So,
yeah, it's a I think Snowflake is another one that we work together on, and it's different security postures, it's different priorities.
Well, I think brands themselves, right, have different levels of engagement in terms of where they are in terms of the scale of their experiences too that they're creating.
Meaning something like Google, everybody knows that brand. Snowflake, probably most people.
A little more under the radar, up and coming. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you've grown through this process that where you're at now, and you have a team, how are you educating and able to train those people that are working underneath you to make sure that they understand those priorities as they're talking to their clients about these topics?
I always like to have what's called a wide net succession plan. And part of that is really around, enabling other people if somebody were to get hit by a bus or to leave our company or decide, hey, I don't want to be in accounts anymore or on Google and I want to go work on Snowflake. The thing that I have always approached with the team is that we all have to be educated enough to be smart enough to have a conversation about it, because at the end of the day, we're making recommendations to our clients and we are liable. And so when we make recommendations and we don't understand at least the basics of what we're asking them to do, we have to believe in it in order for us to really, push them to do it. So we have education summits that we do. We have a monthly meeting, all team monthly meeting. And so we'll talk about updates or hot topics or things that we want to make sure everybody knows about. And then we also really talk to the team about sharing what's happening across not just the Google account, but across GPJ too. Hey, did you see this thing that the Dreamforce team did?
Right.
And it was really, really great. I remember when there was COVID and everybody was wondering well, wow, how did they put Dreamforce on in 2021? And invite attendees. And your team was a huge part of that, right? With the COVID testing and the safety and security. And we had them come and talk to our team about how that was possible. And so I think it's doing things like that.
And does that lead right into your ability to scale? I mean, George P. Johnson's a very large company. Obviously, you have a production piece of this where you actually, produce backgrounds or whatever, scenes. But it's all about the people.
Right.
And so how do you, really work on how you scale your organization? Because as a professional services business, we have same challenges, right? It's all about our people. What have you seen work or not work when trying to scale?
I think it's a few different things. And for me, the first thing is the fit and culture piece of it. I feel like that's super important. And when I talk about that, it's the culture fit in terms of, with Google, at the end of the day, you want to work with people that you like working with, right? And so you're going to continue to choose those people because you enjoy working with them. And so everyone has to have like, I'm not saying everyone has to have the same personality, but there's an aptitude that people who work on the Google account have to have. And then it's the skill set piece. Google just operates really differently than other clients. And so somebody who works on, one brand might not be a great fit for another brand. And I talk about also the fact that Google is not a company that's super hierarchical. And so you have to have every single person on your team from, junior coming in, interns all the way up, able to really present and talk to clients and be engaging. And so there's really a skill set and culture fit that's really important there.
Well, you bring up, Google and Ben Lee, who's our joint client there. Mm-hmm. Ben once asked me, "Are you googly enough to work for us?"
I know, and I feel like googly is like a catch-all. You try to ask them what googly means. It's funny. It's like, yeah.
So shifting in your experience, and you've had been involved in a lot of events. Mm-hmm. What's the toughest day you've had in the event industry?
I was thinking about this, and there's really two extremely tough days that I've had. One was when we had a complete vendor failure on site at an event, and it had nothing to do with George P. Johnson, but we were the ones who made the recommendation for this vendor, and they just had a complete failure, and we had to take accountability, and there was nothing we could do other than just take control and get in there. And I remember our CEO at the time flying in 120 GPJers from all over the US and our fabrication shops to come on site and help us. And, we got there. But it was super stressful. And that was probably one of the most challenging times. And then we were doing Google Cloud Next in 2020. And we were the next large scale conference that was up when COVID hit. And we were about to load in 5 days, and we just had to shut everything down. It was one of those moments where we all kind of looked at each other around the room and we were like, okay, so what do we do? And nobody had been through that before. Right. And it was, it was challenging in the sense that it was something that hadn't been done before. And so we had to navigate through that.
Yeah, I remember that phone call. But lessons learned from that first scenario with a vendor that failed you, like, mm-hmm. How do you make sure that doesn't happen again?
I think a few things. I think when we talk about scope and we award business to vendors, we are really looking at, okay, what else is on their plate, right? Because you talked about, how do you scale as GPJ? And so there are times where I will turn down a project or a program because we just either don't have the right resources for it at the time, or it's not the right fit for us. And so I think, one of the biggest learnings I've had is really doing our due diligence to make sure that those vendors are capable of doing it. They do have the right resources, and that we're going to get that quality from them. And then I think it's also just about continuously pre-planning. I think we let a lot, we put a lot of trust in them. And I think now one of the learnings we've had is we do 30, 60, 90-day audits with all of our vendors to make sure that they're on track and that we're seeing the progress that we want to see from them. So I would say like those are two big things that we've done. And then I always say to the team, we have to have a backup plan. Okay, we do contingency planning. If this happens, what do we do? Right. And so that's part of our practice now.
Yeah, we've had to put that audit process in place too as we've scaled, because we've got caught at that 30-day point and not be as prepared as we thought we were, right. And then got to throw a bunch of resources at it, right. to get there. So the audit program is very good for us. You touched on fit, and I think as with you're entrepreneurial, you're running a big division of GPJ, but if you weren't entrepreneurial, you wouldn't be a good fit. How many times have you had to turn a client down because you're just not the right fit for us?
I don't know how many times I've turned a client down because for me, it's about GBJ certainly has, when it's just either not the right type of brand, not the right type of experience that we want to be doing. And quite frankly, like sometimes it's also about the timing.
Yeah.
But with Google specifically, I've always looked at, it's more about, do we have the capabilities and are we the right partner for you? And that's kind of how I've looked at it. And there have been many times where they've come to us and it's been a large project and it'd be great, but we'd have to build it from scratch. And, you know, I've said to them, it's just, we're not the right partner, but we often make recommendations. So
Right. We learned that lesson the hard way and found that, you know, we put a ton of resources into a client and did a great job for them, but at the end had to look at it and say, they're just not the right fit for us.
Gotcha.
And I think that's,
Yeah.
you know, as a company, I think, you know, all companies have to look at that at certain times and
Yeah.
be like, look, I wish you the best of luck. I don't think you're the right fit for us.
I mean, GBJ had a client, big brand, awesome, auto client, and everyone thought it was going to be this dream client. And 2 years in, it just wasn't working for numerous different reasons. And GBJ walked away from it. And I do remember that. I was in the New York office when it happened. And it was actually really a cool moment for people to see that, okay, we're not going to just, you know, do work with this client because they're such a big name.
Right.
They're not treating our people right.
Right.
And it's just not profitable for us. So we're going to walk away.
Yeah, it's a tough decision. But you got to take care of your people. I mean, that's critical.
Yeah.
What do you see in the future? You know, come back to the security side of the business. And as you look forward the next 3 to 5 years, you know, what do you see as the challenges for your clients as it relates to security and crowd management and the direction that events are going?
I think there's going to be 2 challenges. I think one is going to be monetary. I think clients right now are wanting to do more with less, but more so than ever. And so I think we're kind of beginning to just really make them think smarter about future planning. And we've been trying to think, let's not just think about this year. How do we think about 3 years and what does that look like? So I think we're going to have to really look at budgeting differently than we have and priorities, right? Do you want to have coffee at the event or do you want to do that demo experience?
Right.
So those types of things. And then I think the second thing I've really been thinking about is how is AI going to influence our experiential space and what does that look like, both from our clients, right, are investing heavily in AI. That's becoming a big part of their business and we're having to showcase that. But then how does that also get added and interact into the actual attendee experience and how are we using AI at our events? And so I think that that's going to be a big shift.
Do you see AI really helping your team prepare for events, planning processes and stuff like that? Or where do you think it fits?
I think it does I think right now, to be honest, I feel like companies are trying to figure out how it can benefit. And I also think that at the end of the day, there are things that just cannot replace, you know, a human being and critical thinking. So I do think it's going to be interesting to see like what things could possibly be benefited from AI, and then what are those things that aren't. But you know, we're figuring it out right now, to be honest.
I mean, and I think also, you know, we talk about data, and I, you know, with Google, with Salesforce, with others, I think that we're not doing the best job we can as a combined Stratoscope, George P. Johnson, whoever, using the data that we have from events as well as we could. You know, if we look at, you know, Next last year, you know, we have a ton of data points that I'm not sure that we've all put our minds together and said, you know, with this data, Amy, Bill, we could maybe plan this a little differently. So I think that's something else. And maybe AI can help us with that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I might be too optimistic there. Last question.
Yeah.
Where do you see, like, let me back up actually. You know, you've seen security and then you've worked with, you know, companies like ours, whether it's Stratoscope or Ingresso Tech. What's the difference when you know that our team is on it versus, former XYZ or, whatever, what has been your experience? How would you identify the differences and what's your recommendation?
The biggest difference is that you're not just an executor, right? You're not just executing a plan and doing the thing, right? Your Stratoscope has really become a part of our embedded team and an extension of our team. And you're part of the strategic thinking that we do. And I mean, you're involved from way in the beginning when we're doing floor planning,
right.
And you're not having to react to the things that are being put in place. You're actually part of the process of us making those plans so that it's easier and more seamless for us, as we continue the planning process. And I think that that's probably, when I think about Stratoscope and how you engage with GPJ and our clients, that's the biggest differentiator. You're an extension of our team. You're part of the strategic thinking, part of the audience journey planning. You're not just our safety and security team executing a plan. You're actually part of making that plan.
I appreciate that. I also think that sometimes we're also the obstacle people. Because you guys dream up these beautiful paths and how's it, and we're like,
Aren't we
I
all,
don't think
though,
that's going
right?
to work.
It's like, what we call it, our clients have champagne dreams on a beer budget, right? So I think but that's what we need, right? We need to be challenged as well. So,
Right. Well, look, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.